everybody, Blackfit here. This will be a video series on optimal animations to use for every melee weapon in Vermintide 2. We're going to cover how to deal with hordes, both DPS and control, and then armor and monster DPS as well. We'll also talk about animation quirks with every weapon. Some things have some hidden features that you might not know about. So we'll start with Sienna, and we'll start with her dagger here. So it's got a pretty basic light attack pattern. The only thing to note is that you move faster than base walk speed. So this, you can just spam light attacks to move fast, and get out of dodge, get space to use your staff. Similar thing with the push stabs. They move faster than base walk speed, and they move faster than light spam. So use this, and then once you're out of stamina, light spam to get to where you want, and then use your staff. The other thing to note about the push stab is that it only takes half a shield or one stamina, as you can see. This is a common theme with every dagger type weapon in the game. So you can really spam them pretty hard, especially at the beginning of a game, to just make distance. The last thing to note about the push stab is that it has a bleed dot. You can see those little damage ticks afterward. It's the same bleed dot as the daggers for Crowbill. It also works on armor. Does half damage roughly to armor, but it does do total 8 damage from the bleed dot to armor, so it's kind of useful there. Charge attacks, it's a bash and then an overhead. Both of these you can apply a burn dot, which is different than the bleed dot. They actually can tick at the same time. Right? Different dots, they'll go at the same time. You can do a lot of damage there. And the one interesting thing about both of those dots is they are subject to this unstable strength passive on Unchained. The damage itself will be increased, and the burn dots from melee weapons are subject to the Lingering Flames talent on Battle Wizard right here. Not the bleed dot, just the burn dot, but it will last forever on enemies until they die. And if you do damage to an armored enemy and apply the burn dot, it'll even work on armored enemies. So now for optimal animations to use, light spam is generally your best unarmored DPS, so use this to kill hordes, but really it struggles against higher density hordes, so you're going to want to use it on low density trash mobs that get through your front line or flank you randomly, stuff like that. Just if you use slave rats or clan rats that get through. If you for some reason need to face tank a horde with a dagger and you're not using your staff for some reason, Charge 1, this bash attack, is pretty good control, can hit infinite targets. It does crap damage even with the burn dot. So, use it sparingly, like push, charge, you should have enough space to use your staff. Against armor, pretty straightforward. Charge spam, if you get headshots, you do almost double damage, just about 9 damage to the body. Plus it applies the burn dot even to armor. Also, bleed dot into charge spam. Reapply your bleed dot every few charge patterns. So get both your dots ticking, charge spam. Even though charge 1 is just a bash and it does virtually no damage to armor, it does stagger a lot of elites, pretty much everything, even Chaos Warriors maybe, if they're not in an attack animation, it can stagger them. So it is worth using the bash, not for DPS, but for control. Now for bosses, well, if you ever, for some reason, once again, find yourself in a situation where you're using your dagger to DPS down a boss and not your staff, you can push stab, light spam. Keep that bleed dot going, and then just light spam. Does pretty terrible damage to bosses, but dagger in general is not going to be a good, elite or high health DPS tool. Okay, but we'll move on to the flame sword. It's actually kind of similar to the dagger in a number of ways. It does not have any of the mobility, its push tab is slow, its light attack pattern is kind of slow, but the push tab applies a burn dot to everything that it hits. It's also a horizontal thing, not a stab. Doesn't actually do armor damage, but it still applies the burn dot. Now the charge attacks are really interesting. It's a claw, it's also a shield bash, and then this horizontal strike. Both of these apply burn dots to basically everything they hit. And the claw As I said, it's a bash, so it has a lot of stagger on it. Now, as far as optimal animations to use, it's really similar. Light spam on like low density trash mobs that get through your front line or flank you for whatever reason. But against pretty much anything that's either armored or higher density, charge spam. This is actually reasonably fast, you get a good amount of control, decent DPS, especially with the burn dot. It's like deceptive how much DPS it can do. And once again, the burn dot is subject to unstable strength passive and lingering flames talent. I think the flame sword here is actually the best weapon, melee weapon, to deliver this lingering flames passive to as many enemies as possible, or just lingering flames talent rather. Then against, or we'll move on to the one-handed sword, like the normal sword, the non-flame sword. So there's no dots with this at all. It's the same sword that Crowbill has. It's pretty straightforward. Light attack, the third light has a high damage overhead that does good armor damage. These other attacks don't do anything, so for armor damage we're going to want to work to that. But there's also these charge attacks that have high stagger, decent damage versus pretty much everything. And so we'll move on to the animations. For hordes, light spam. It's pretty straightforward. Dodge stance, light spam. Throw a push stab in there if you need control. That simple. Versus armor or high health elites, also bosses probably, you're going to charge 1, charge 2, light. Charge 1, charge 2, light. Charge, light. So basically we want to get to that third light as soon as possible, or as much as possible. That's your like high impact attack, right? It's an overhead, you can get a headshot, do a lot of damage. But we don't want to get through light 1 and light 2 to get there, so we're going to use charge 1, charge 2 to get to light 3. And that works pretty well because charge 1, charge 2 actually got buffed. They're decent now, and they have high stagger, so it's a pretty effective way to deal, to control and DPS armor and high health elites like Maulers or even Berserkers. Against bosses, I'd say do the same thing. Charge, light. We'll move on to the Mace. This is a bit more interesting. It's got some interesting animations with it. First thing to note is charge 1 does the burn dot thing. Once again, burn dot subject to unstable strength passive and lingering flames talent. Now for your anti-horde combo, it's going to be push stab, light, light. Push stab, light, light. This is pretty much the only way you can get fully horizontal attacks, otherwise you have to go through either light 1 or charge 1, which is usually not ideal. You're going to sacrifice control if you do that. You might take an unnecessary hit, so push stab, light, light. Dodge dance at your leisure. The push stab itself is pretty respectable push, so you don't necessarily need to dodge there. And if you keep doing lights, as you just saw, you go back into that overhead, so you kind of want to, you really want to stop after 2 lights after the push stab. Now for armor. It's a little bit of a debate here. Basically, you can do lights 1 spam and with a block reset, and it does pretty good armor damage, really good single target damage in general. Kind of crit there, so I was just saying, but yeah, really good DPS there. Now charge 1 does good damage, but I think the DPS is slower than purely light 1 spam. However, you apply that burn dot. So if you do 1 charge attack and then 3 lights, you keep that burn dot ticking for as long as you're hitting, and then you can renew it. So 1, light 1, light 2, light 3, charge, 1, light 2, light 3, charge. So just get good at that block cancel, or that block reset. As soon as you hit the target, you want to block, and it'll allow you to renew it. So do that, charge 1, and then 3 light spam for armor and bosses. One interesting quirk with this is that if I go to the armory mod real quick, the Mace, so if you go to heavy attack 1, it's monster damage, which is like mini bosses, 14.5. Light 1 is actually 16, so really you want light 1 spam. The only way the first heavy attack actually does more damage is because of that burn dot, as you can see. So once again, just charge 1 to apply the burn dot, then light 1 spam. We'll move on to the Crowbill last, the DLC weapon. So it's pretty straightforward. The only quirk is on light 4. That stab you do with the burn dot, once again subject to unstable strength and lingering flames. Basically, you light spam everything. There's no animation perks with this weapon. Just so you know, it isn't basically an axe, it has virtually no cleave, so getting horizontal strikes is not super important for control, but just get good at dodging. Push stab just to get some space if you need it. You can light attack down armor, you can light attack down hordes. The only time you're really going to want to use your charge attacks is against Chaos Warriors, and that's because if we look at the army mod, once again, Crowbill, light attacks, 10 damage to armor. This is Storm Vermin armor. Full damage basically, only half to Chaos Warrior armor, which is this heavy armor. Whereas the charge attacks have full damage on both, roughly. So, charge attack spam if there's like 1 or 2 Chaos Warriors that you can pretty safely charge attack spam down. Just low density, high health Chaos Warrior type entities. I also would say if there's some Maulers mixed in, don't be afraid to charge attack spam. The charge attacks do good stagger anyway, so it's worth it, even if it's ever so slightly less DPS versus the unarmored target than light spam. But if you're under pressure, if there's, Chaos Warrior plus, 40 mobs, light spam down the mobs, and then once just the Chaos Warrior and a couple other stragglers maybe, then switch to charge attacks. You also can maybe open up on an engagement, so if there's like a Chaos Warrior coming, or not a Chaos Warrior, a Storm Vermin coming, charge attack into light spam. It'll be a little bit better. You can maybe like one-tap them, the headshot, if you have high melee stacks from Unchained. So charge attacks, really, if you need to stagger something big, use them. If you need to DPS Chaos Warriors, use them. Otherwise, light spam everything. And that's it for the Sienna video. Thank you.